Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic. Milosevic reigned over what was left of Yugoslavia as it fell apart in the 1990s, surviving crippling UN sanctions, wars in Slovenia, Croatia and Bosnia, violent Albanian separatism in Kosovo, NATO airstrikes against his country, an ICTY war crimes indictment, and 40 years of marriage with the control-freak wife. Milosevic was definitely a force to be reckoned with.
Znači, da bi mi proizvedli isto ovo tuce olovaka koje nam trebalo u oktobru 50 dinara, nama sada treba 75 dinara. Izvezemo te olovke ponovo u Sjedinjene Američke Države, dobijemo dolar, kurs dolara je ostao nepromijenjen i dobijemo 60 dinara. Mi smo već zatvorili sve.
Thanks to stabilization, many domestic companies which could do good business had to close down.
Well, Yugoslavia was an important player in the world, especially after World War II, when the United States took on the Soviet Union and made it its chief enemy. When Tito split from Stalin and formed a third way. Not only Tito, this includes Nehru in India, it includes Tito, it includes Sukarno in Indonesia, and Gabdel Abdel Nasser in Egypt, and Nkrumah in Ghana. These are hugely rich countries with huge resources.
If you want to live in a society where your compatriots are poor and you are rich, and you think that's better, a better society, then you would like it.
A Chilean family trying to live on the average wage had to spend 75% of its income on bread. Riding the bus or drinking milk became luxuries. Those who revolted were put in concentration camps. 100,000 people were jailed, thousands were killed.
Having won the Cold War, and that led, of course, to the breakup of the Soviet Empire, both in the Warsaw Pact and Eastern European countries, and within the Soviet Union itself. That has helped contribute to a movement toward democracy.
This monetary policy, known as the quasi-fixed exchange rate, wasn't new. It was first adopted by Thailand in the 1980s. The way it works is you tie your country's official exchange rate to another country's currency. In this case, Croatia tied it to the euro. This creates the illusion of a fluctuating exchange rate, the illusion of a Croatian currency.
Čak se i naš novac uopće niti ne proizvodi u Hrvatskoj. To je jedna stravična spoznaja. Znači, ako uzmete novčanicu od 10 kuna, tu gdje je Pulska arena, na donjoj strani piše Gieske and Devrient, Germany. Koji na novčanici od 20 kuna piše Gieske and Devrient, Germany. Znači, tiskara je Njemačka. Na novčanici od 50 kuna, pak one se proizvode u Austriji. Piše, evo, CEPS, Austrija. Novčanica od 1000 kuna također se proizvodi u Njemačkoj. I na kraju 100 kuna, CEPS, Austrija.
Because Chile was supporting NATO during the conflict, they have some difficulty to cooperate with us against the people who help them. You know, it is politically, if you are my associate in a conflict, how can you act against my associate?
In a few cases, however, the Hague Tribunal did manage to bring an indictment against Kosovo Albanians who were accused of committing crimes, like in the case of Ramush Haradinaj. Don't let the glasses fool you. Haradinaj was one ruthless KLA militant in the 1990s, accused of murdering Serbs, Roma, and even non-compliant Albanians during the Kosovo War.
We had a lot of difficulties to come to an end to the investigation against Haradinaj. But at the end we achieved it. So we could issue an indictment against him, and this indictment was confirmed by a judge.
However, as the trial started and progressed, something strange happened.
Haradinaj was freed of all charge because a number of witnesses were killed. According to former Hague Tribunal prosecutor Carla Del Ponte, 9 witnesses were killed between 2003 and 2007. So in such a situation, living witnesses are frightened, and some of them refuse to testify, others change their testimony. The UN mission in Kosovo always refused to cooperate with the Hague Tribunal by refusing to send evidence of war crime.
It is understandable that NATO didn't want their KLA buddies in jail, but the largest single act of ethnic cleansing during the Yugoslav wars, Operation Storm, in which Croat forces ethnically cleansed 250,000 Serbs from the Krajina region in Croatia, with thousands killed in cold blood, was perhaps the biggest test for the tribunal. General Ante Gotovina was in charge of that operation, and the Hague Tribunal put up an indictment. Gotovina was arrested and tried, and, believe it or not, convicted.
First instance trial, he was convicted 23 years. So evidences were there. Enough evidences to convict and to sentence him.
However, another strange thing happened here. The case quickly went to appeal, the previous sentence was overturned, and Gotovina was immediately released.
It was extremely damaging to Serbs in this case, you know, and killing in Operation Storm. They obliged the Serbs to leave Knin and so on and so on. So we prove it. In the first instance, Gotovina was convicted. So why now on appeal this completely different decision?
You think it was more of a political decision?
You say it, and I must say yes, because I cannot believe it.
Ante Gotovina was given a hero's welcome in Croatia. But not all Croats believed in the Gotovina myth.
Gotovina je na 4 ratne godine zaradio poduzeće hidroelektroniskogradnju u trenutku privatizacije vrijednu 200 milijuna kuna, kuću u rezidencijalnom dijelu Zagreba koja danas vrijedi €1 milijun, zaradio je samo na izgradnji autocesta 20 milijuna kuna, zaradio je vilu u Pakoštanima koja danas vrijedi sigurno €3,5 milijuna u samo more i još generalsku mirovinu koja iznosi €1.500. To mu je za kavu i piće s prijateljem. I to je heroj. Po svakoj definiciji, to je ratni profiter.
This war profiteer, however, was a free man, with the blessing of the West. He played an important part in what the West really wanted, and when a nation has war profiteers as heroes, it's no wonder that as the fighting subsides, the system remains corrupt.
Tuđman je 90. godina imenovao takozvane tajne povjerenike, koji su formalno pravno bili vlasnici tajnih računa u inozemstvu. Tu je bilo i kriminalaca i političara. Tu su zajedno povjerenici bili Vladimir Zagorec, osuđen zbog organiziranog kriminala, najodlikovaniji hrvatski general. Hrvoje Petrać, osuđen zbog organiziranog kriminala, notorni šef jedne od mafija u Hrvatskoj. Tu vam je Branimir Glavaš, osuđeni ratni zločinac. Tu vam je Ivan Čermak, naftni bos koji je svoj naftni kapital stekao na ratnom profiterstvu i trgovini naftom s Arkanom u vrijeme rata. Tu vam je Ivo Sanader.
Ivo Sanader ruled as Prime Minister of Croatia from 2003 to 2009, and under the mask of being a European Union-friendly statesman, bought people left and right.
Sanader je mislio da je on novi Tuđman. Okupio je ekipu i rekao sada ćete sve tajne račune na kojima ste povjerenici kontrolu predati meni. Naravno, ni za kog od njih Ivo Sanader nije imao autoritet Franje Tuđmana.
Since this didn't work, Sanader had to look elsewhere for money.
Krenuo je pljačkati javna poduzeća, izvlačiti novac iz Hrvatske elektroprivrede, iz hrvatskih autocesta, nastavio šverc cigareta. Dakle, morao je naći alternativne izvore tih multimilijunskih crnih prihoda.
According to the Washington Times, Sanader turned Croatia into a gangster country, and by controlling most of the media, including state television and leading Croatian newspapers, he could make sure that the people only saw things his way. During his rule, Sanader amassed enormous wealth that included illegally acquired property, luxurious villas, and a lavish collection of watches worth over $200,000. After 6 years in power, Sanader decided to step down.
Ja sam svoju dionicu odradio. Sad je vrijeme za druge.
Good. Finally a stop to the criminalization of the state.
Ne, drugi mogu nastaviti.
Eventually, Sanader was arrested, put on trial, and sentenced to 10 years for his wrongdoings. However, the system remained corrupt, and the people of the former Yugoslavia could only hope that an honest, hard-working man would show up and fight against systemic corruption. He came in the form of a TV morning talk show guest.
U svakom slučaju izvode pizdarije. Jebu na mate jer smo blesavi. A u tome im pomaže ova kurva od međunarodne zajednice.
Whoops, no, not this guy. I meant the other guy.
Institucije koje treba da se bave tom problematikom bave se teorijom. Šta je korupcija, kako je korupcija nastala, a ne vidim plodove rada.
Ljubiša Milanović was appointed by former Serbian Health Minister Zoran Stanković to his anti-corruption division. He was the first state official to openly criticize the police, state prosecutors, and anti-corruption agency, claiming that they just weren't interested in helping him fight corruption.
Ja sam pre jedno 2,5 meseca otišao u gradski SUP sa jednim predmetom kompletiranim, znači ne samo što nije napisana krivična prijava, znači sa svim dokazima. Otišao sam kod nadležnog načelnika, doneo predmet. Dragi gospodin je svo vreme gledao crtani film, možda ste vi puštali neki dobar crtani film u to vreme. I onda, kad Paja Patak tamo nije radio to što treba da radi, onda bi je usput me pitao o čemu se radi, ali mu je prioritet bio crtani film.
I kad se završio crtani film?
Pa nažalost nije se završio crtani film.
Yes, the cartoon never ended, but Milanović's position did. He quickly got sacked by Health Minister Stanković after these statements on state television. Fortunately, the Serbian political elite took these warnings seriously and decided to act decisively.
Boris Tadić je pojeo 4 kugle sladoleda je pojeo.
Ah, but who can blame them? That's what the people love to watch. They've been conditioned by the media to look the other way when it came to matters of urgency that could really affect their lives. Considering what the new guys after Milosevic did to the education system, it made some sense.
Former Yugoslavia had an excellent educational system. I'm product of that system, so most of the people from those years, my colleagues, are all over the world and they're extremely successful. However, what happened after 2001, they simply assumed that whatever was suggested by European Union, they have to implement it regardless of consequences.
In 2001, Jasmina Vujic, a professor at Berkeley University, the first woman to become dean of the Department of Nuclear Engineering in the United States, suggested to the then Minister of Education Gaša Knežević and his associate professor Srbijanka Turajlić that before they attempt any reforms, they should invite professors from the diaspora who worked in all kinds of education systems and form the best one for Serbia. There was no reply. The reforms went on as planned.
Gaša Knežević je želeo da se celokupan koncept tradicionalnog obrazovanja zameni jednim novim neoliberalnim obrazovanjem. Nakon 15 godina vidimo da je dovelo do katastrofalnih posljedica. Po nekim istraživanjima trećina đaka je funkcionalno nepismeno, čak 20% đaka koji su završili srednje škole govore da nisu pročitali niti jednu knjigu, tako da je celokupan sistem obrazovanja došao na najniže grane u istoriji obrazovanja u Srbiji.
Bottom line is that students of today are learning 10% of what we learned in the previous system. So they are producing new generations of students that will be poorly educated, particularly in terms of higher education in my field, such as electrical engineering or mechanical engineering and so on.
Yes, the education system made no sense, and no one had the guts to fix it. After all, a good education system would lead to a smart populace. And which government in their right mind would want a free-thinking society that could critically analyze what that same government was doing?
Koliko je 12 puta 8? Pazi, to je preko 100.
Nije tačno, 96.
Things weren't any better for cultural workers or artists. Culture and art simply weren't on the radar for many people. The most interesting story I heard was when independent filmmaker Branko Radaković, who was making his documentary Culture is Blooming, asked a guy in the Serbian town of Paraćin about his thoughts on culture.
Ma jebe se meni za kulturu, šta ti, ja sam čovjek.
Branko put his answer in the film trailer.
Ja sam to stavio na YouTube-u i smatrao sam to veoma efektivnim, zato što je to zapravo žalosna suština uopšte srpske kulture.
Then he got a call from the guy.
On zove i kaže, ej, ja sam vidio trailer, ajde molim te izbaci to iz trailera, jer ja sam u partiji koja će verovatno da postane vladajuća u tom gradu kom sam snimao. Njemu je to smetalo jer je on smatrao da će kada dođe na vlast njegova partija da postane direktor kulturnog centra u Paraćinu.
Uh-oh. Somebody was too honest in front of the camera.
Pošto je više puta zvao, ja sam mu neko dobro rekao, znaš da, ti ćeš ako da uspeš 100% da postaneš direktor kulturnog centra, jer njima baš takvi ljudi trebaju. Jer se ispostavilo da direktore po mnogim mestima, znači ne samo u Paraćinu, nego to je uopštena situacija da postavljaju ljude koje briga za kulturu.
The guy still wanted the clip removed. Branco refused. Since the government didn't waste time on irrelevant tasks such as creating a civilized populace, the media used their power to popularize shows that educated and enlightened the people on what really mattered.
You use the term democracy, its presence or its absence, strictly for politics.
The United States has a pretty good record, I think, over the centuries of helping move countries toward democracy.
In fact, the United States instituted regime change wherever democracy resulted in a leader who was not favorable to Western economic interests.
Any country or political movement that tries to use the land, the labor, the capital, the markets of that country in a way outside of this global imperial system will be designated as an enemy, as an aggressor, as an oppressor, as a danger to the American people, and therefore we have to attack them.
It was also important to make the American people afraid of the proclaimed enemy.
I was raised, my whole generation, it was the communists. Communists here, communists everywhere. Communists going to get your mama, you know.
You are the target of those who would trample the liberties of free men. You are in the crosshairs of the bomb sight. An enemy is centering on you.
Now the communists are gone, and that became a crisis for a while. They had to find another demon who is a threat and frightens the people enough. And now it's terrorists, the terrorists.
Since the end of the Cold War, 1991, the end of communism, the United States has behaved very badly. As a sole superpower, it has tried to dominate the world completely.
Your country has to be thrown open. It has to be a satellite for us. The empire sees two kinds of nations out there. One is satellites, or client states they're called, and the other is potential enemy. Iraq is a very special, interesting case, because you saw both of those things happening with the very same leader, Saddam Hussein. When he was murdering everybody on the left, when he destroyed the Iraqi democracy, Washington loved him. They loved him. They sent him aid. They took pictures with him, and he was their poster boy. And then when he turned around and started insisting on a better deal on the oil quotas, he didn't go toward the free market, and he committed economic nationalism. Then they suddenly started saying, oh, Saddam Hussein, he's worse than Hitler.
It seemed very dangerous to support policies the US didn't like, and it didn't matter whether you were a dictator or a Democrat. When Hugo Chavez was democratically elected in Venezuela in 1998, promising to stand up to the United States, many thought he wouldn't last long. His first task was to change the 1961 constitution that was drawn up by the neoliberal elites.
This constitution was making for them for their benefit, not for the benefit of the people. Who promised the people in 1998 in the campaign to do that, and in 1999 who make a new constitution. In our constitution, in the first article, we change our foreign policy. Our policy will be based in three important things: cooperation, complementation, and solidarity.
What this meant in practice was soon noticeable.
In 2001, when in Argentina was a very difficult economic situation, the first country and the only country help Argentina was Venezuela, was Chavez. Cristina all the time said that. Chavez tell her, you have not dollars, you have coal, you have meat, and we have oil. We give you oil. You can pay oil with coal, with meat. It is not necessary to use dollars.
Wait, working together on exchanging products they produce? Not bickering amongst each other? Not importing US products? Not using the dollar? Blasphemy.
He announced that Venezuela would pull out of both the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. And his government took control of the last remaining privately run oil fields.
Chavez only practiced state socialism that used to be practiced in Yugoslavia. But for this Chavez became an enemy of the United States.
Hugo Chavez is a dictator.
The world's worst dictators. Hugo Chavez.
The dictator.
A dictator.
Anti-democratic despot.
Tyrant with a radical agenda.
Crushing free people.
There is such a thing as a killer clown, and he may be it.
In 15 years, we have 19 elections, 19, and we only didn't win in one. We won 18 elections, 18. And all the time say that Chavez is a dictator. And now they are saying that Maduro is dictator.
The media were playing an important role for what was being prepared for Chavez. It was 2002, and for the CIA, everything was going as planned.
In the end, this is what triggered the overthrow of Hugo Chavez. Armed gangs loyal to the Venezuelan president firing on thousands of anti-government protesters. After 16 people were killed and hundreds wounded, last night soldiers surrounded the presidential palace.
Even though it was never established who fired at both pro-Chavez and anti-Chavez demonstrators, Chavez was taken to prison. Another democratically elected leader was replaced by a dictator, Venezuelan Federation of Chambers of Commerce president Pedro Carmona, a pro-business elites leader who quickly dissolved the National Assembly and Supreme Court and declared the constitution void. While the United States were cheering on the real dictator, Carmona, something unexpected happened. People started pouring into the streets. A pro-Chavez popular uprising was becoming unstoppable.
The power of the people in the street. We go to the street, and in front of us was the military. We are not afraid. We go on, no? And we ask that we want our president back.
The pro-Chavez Presidential Guard took back the presidential palace and reinstalled Chavez as president. The coup d'etat failed. In spite of huge CIA support, and almost all of the Venezuelan media also supporting the coup. When Chavez came to power, 80% of the country was classified as poor.
Now our poor people is less than 20%.
At the beginning of Chavez's rule, 45% were extremely poor.
So now very, very poor is 5.6%. It's the first time in the history of Venezuela that 65% of the money we get about the oil are using for increase the level of living of the people.
Perhaps Chavez had some good ideas, and his ideas spread throughout Latin America.
Inicia com a eleição do presidente Hugo Chávez e logo depois a América Latina ela passa a ter um novo rosto político. É formado um novo mapa geopolítico da nossa região. Isso também gerou uma união muito grande e o povo resolveu dar um fim a esses governos neoliberais e sair do jugo do consenso de Washington.